In the early 20th century, when budget and food was tight, our grandparents had to get creative in the kitchen to survive. They didn't have the luxury of fancy ingredients or modern cooking gadgets. Instead, they made do with what they had, using resourceful recipes that were passed down through generations. Whether you're curious about the history of food, want to explore budget-friendly meal ideas, or simply want to connect with your heritage, these forgotten poor man meals are a fascinating glimpse into the past. So, grab a cup of coffee, pull up a chair, and let's dive into the flavorful world of forgotten poor man meals no one makes anymore. 1. Hoover Stew. Alright, let's kick things off with Hoover Stew, the ultimate Depression-era survival meal that made every ingredient count. If you've never had it, imagine a hearty, comforting stew made with scraps of meat, beans, potatoes, onions, and sometimes even cabbage or carrots. This wasn't just any stew, it was a meal that could stretch a family's food budget for days. Born out of necessity during the Great Depression, Hoover Stew was a staple in many American households, particularly those struggling to make ends meet. It was a testament to the resourcefulness of home cooks who could turn scraps into a satisfying meal. Some versions were made with bacon or ham hocks for added flavor, while others kept it simple with just vegetables and beans. And let's be real, the best part was savoring every last drop of that flavorful broth. If you grew up hearing stories about the Depression, you might remember your grandparents talking about this very stew. It was a meal that brought families together, and its legacy lives on as a reminder of the power of food to comfort and sustain us. But if you're thinking, okay, but what about something that could feed the whole family? Don't worry, meatless meatloaf is up next. 2. Meatless meatloaf. Okay, real talk. If you grew up during the Great Depression or heard stories from your grandparents, you know that meatless meatloaf was a staple in many American households. This was the ultimate resourceful meal that could feed a whole family without breaking the bank. Meatless meatloaf was made by mixing ground oats, vegetables, eggs, and spices, and then baking it in a loaf shape. The result? A hearty, comforting meal that was cheap, easy, and loved by everyone. Why was it so popular? Because it was a budget-friendly alternative to traditional meatloaf, and it was ridiculously versatile. Plus, since it used oats as the base, it was a great way to stretch food resources. This was also the era of creative cooking, where home cooks had to think outside the box to make meals stretch. Meatless meatloaf was a testament to that resourcefulness, and it remains a nostalgic favorite among many who grew up eating it. But if you needed something to go with that meatloaf, fried fatback was the perfect side dish. But if you needed something heavier on collagen to go with all that richness, tripe was the next must-have. 3. Tripe. If there's one dish that screams old school, no-frills cooking, it's tripe. This was the ultimate thrifty meal, a way to turn a cheap, tough cut of meat into a hearty, comforting dish. The classic tripe recipe was made by slow cooking the tripe in a flavorful broth with vegetables and spices until it was tender and flavorful. The best part? The rich, unctuous texture that was both soothing and satisfying. Why was this so popular? Because it was dirt cheap, filling, and could be stretched to feed a whole family. Plus, it was a great way to use up every part of the animal, reducing food waste and making the most of limited resources. Tripe was also a staple in many immigrant communities, where it was often served with crusty bread or over rice. Pair it with some boiled potatoes, carrots, and onions, and you had yourself a full, satisfying meal without breaking the bank. And if you wanted something even more proteinous, liver mush was the next go-to. 4. Liver mush. Liver mush in the rural South was the ultimate humble delight. Whether it was homemade or from a local butcher, it was a coarse, crumbly, and flavorful mixture of pig liver, head cheese, and spices. Homemade versions were made with love and care, as families would grind the liver and head cheese together, mixing in secret spices and herbs to create a unique flavor profile. It was often served sliced, pan-fried, or scrambled with eggs, and was a staple at family breakfasts and brunches. The best part? The versatility. Liver mush was just as good on its own as it was paired with biscuits, toast, or even as a side dish. And let's be honest, the nostalgia alone was worth it. Whether homemade or store-bought, the taste of liver mush transported you back to a simpler time, when life was slower and family gatherings were cherished. It may not have been fancy, but liver mush was a true Southern classic, and its rich, meaty flavor has been satisfying appetites for generations. 5. Hoover pudding. Alright, the next is known as Hoover's pudding, or Depression pudding, This dessert was a creative solution for families struggling to make ends meet during the Great Depression. Hoover pudding was typically made with simple, affordable ingredients like flour, sugar, eggs, milk, and vanilla extract. The mixture was poured into a baking dish and topped with a crumbly mixture of flour, sugar, and butter, creating a crunchy, cobbler-like topping. When baked, the pudding transformed into a warm, comforting dessert with a crispy, golden brown crust. It was often served warm, topped with a drizzle of caramel sauce or a sprinkle of cinnamon. Hoover pudding was a testament to the resourcefulness of home cooks during difficult times. With its humble ingredients and simple preparation,
Merci pour that.
this dessert brought joy and comfort to families who needed it most. 6. Fried fatback. But if you were looking for a down-home, comforting meal in the rural South, fried fatback was the ultimate staple. This wasn't just any old bacon. It was a thick, juicy cut of pork fatback that was breaded and fried to a crispy golden brown. It was often served with a side of beans, greens, or cornbread, and was a staple at family breakfasts and brunches. The best part? The smoky, savory flavor that came from frying the fatback in a cast-iron skillet. It was a taste of pure nostalgia and a reminder of the simple, comforting meals that warmed hearts and bellies. 7. Dandelion salad. Alright, dandelion salad is one of those dishes that's so retro, it's almost hard to believe it was real. But trust me, it was a massive hit in rural America, especially during the Great Depression. This wasn't just any old green salad. It was a tangy, slightly bitter mix of dandelion greens, boiled eggs, onions, and sometimes even bacon or ham. The best part? The way the tangy greens paired with the richness of the eggs and meat. It was a taste of pure simplicity and a reminder of the resourceful ways people used to eat. Dandelion salad was also a testament to the thriftiness of home cooks, who would forage for wild greens to add some freshness to their meals. 8. Fried green tomatoes. If dandelion salad was all about thriftiness and making do, then fried green tomatoes were about Southern charm and hospitality. This was the ultimate comfort food that made you feel like you were sitting on the porch, sipping sweet tea with your best friends. Fried green tomatoes have been a Southern staple for generations, but they really came into their own in the 60s. And let's be real, anything that came out of the South was considered warm, welcoming, and downright delicious. But by the 1960s, fried green tomatoes had made their way into middle-class homes, becoming a go-to side dish for family dinners, church gatherings, and community potlucks. So, what's the magic behind them? The classic version included thinly sliced green tomatoes, dredged in flour, eggs, and breadcrumbs, then fried to a crispy golden brown in a skillet. It was crunchy on the outside, tender on the inside, and a little bit tangy, making it the perfect contrast to heavier 60s dishes like meatloaf or mashed potatoes. Some people even added a sprinkle of paprika or a dollop of remoulade sauce for extra flavor. Why were fried green tomatoes considered the ultimate Southern comfort food? Because they were a testament to the resourcefulness and hospitality of Southern cooks, who could take a humble ingredient like green tomatoes and turn it into something truly special. Plus, it was all about the love and care that went into making them. Fried green tomatoes were often served with a side of warm smiles and friendly chatter, making them taste all the sweeter. 9. Corn fritters. If you've never had a corn fritter, just know that it was the snack of summertime nostalgia. And I mean that literally. It's a taste of backyard barbecues, family picnics, and lazy summer days. Corn fritters were crispy, golden brown bites of heaven that you could make by mixing together a simple batter of cornmeal, flour, eggs, and milk, and then frying it up in a skillet. They were crunchy on the outside, fluffy on the inside, and bursting with sweet corn flavor, making them feel like a warm hug in every bite. Why were they so beloved? Because they were a staple of summer gatherings. Every family had their own secret recipe, and every picnic or barbecue had a plate of freshly fried corn fritters. They were also super easy to make and fun to eat. You could enjoy them as a snack, side dish, or even dessert. Yes, really, and they were always a crowd pleaser. Plus, they were a great way to use up fresh corn and other summer veggies, making them a delicious and practical treat for families on a budget. 10. Depression cake. Let's take a moment to appreciate this humble hero, depression cake. It was a testament to resourcefulness, a deliciously sweet symbol of making do with what you had. This wasn't some fancy layered masterpiece. No, It was a simple, hearty cake made with flour, sugar, eggs, and water, ingredients that were often scarce during tough times. Yet, despite its humble origins, depression cake was a masterpiece of comfort food, providing sustenance and solace to those who needed it most. So, what made it so special? For starters, it was a cake that refused to apologize for its simplicity. Made with just a few ingredients, it was the epitome of thriftiness, a reminder that you didn't need much to make something truly special. And yet, despite its austerity, depression cake was incredibly rich, with a deep velvety texture that was both comforting and indulgent. But what really sets depression cake apart is its history. Born out of necessity, it was a cake that represented resilience, resourcefulness, and community. During the Great Depression, families would often come together to share what little they had, and depression cake was often at the center of these gatherings. It was a symbol of hope, a reminder that even in the darkest times, there was always something to be shared, always something to be celebrated. So, let's not forget depression cake, this humble hero of the past. It may not be as flashy as some of its modern counterparts, but it's a reminder that sometimes the simplest things in life are the most extraordinary. 11. Bread soup. Coming in at number 11 is a dish that's often overlooked, but was once a staple in many households: bread soup. Now, don't think for a moment that this was some bland, boring meal. Nope, bread soup was a culinary masterpiece that transformed stale bread into a delicious, comforting treat. The idea was simple. You'd take some stale bread, tear it into pieces, and then simmer it in a flavorful broth made with vegetables, herbs, and sometimes even meat or beans. The result? A hearty, satisfying soup that could warm both hearts and bellies. This dish had been a staple in many European households, particularly in Italy and Portugal, where bread was a sacred food. But unfortunately, with the rise of more modern, trendy soups, bread soup has become a relic of the past. It's a shame, really, because this humble soup deserves to be rediscovered and celebrated. 12. Hearty cakes. This next dish is a testament to the resourcefulness of our ancestors, because if you've never had hoe cakes before, the idea of a pancake made from cornmeal, water, and salt might sound a bit unappetizing. But trust me, these crispy golden brown treats were a staple in many rural households, particularly during the Great Depression. They were the perfect solution for when flour was scarce, but cornmeal was plentiful. Ready in just a few minutes, hoe cakes were a simple yet satisfying meal that could be enjoyed at any time of day. You'd take some cornmeal, mix it with water and a pinch of salt, and then fry it up in a skillet. The result? A crunchy, slightly sweet pancake that was perfect for sopping up juices or serving alongside a hearty stew. It was basically a taste of comfort in every bite. Sadly, hoe cakes have largely fallen out of favor in modern times, replaced by more refined breakfast options. But for those who remember enjoying them as children, hoe cakes remain a beloved and nostalgic treat that's worth rediscovering. 13. Oatmeal porridge. Alright, number 13 is a breakfast staple that's been largely forgotten: oatmeal porridge. Now, don't think for a moment that this was some bland, boring bowl of mush. Nope. Oatmeal porridge was a hearty, comforting start to the day that warmed both the belly and the soul. The idea was simple. You'd take some rolled oats, cook them in water or milk, and then add in some sugar, spices, and maybe even some fruit or nuts. The result? A delicious, filling breakfast that could fuel you for a day of hard work. This dish had been a morning staple for centuries, particularly in Scotland and Ireland, where oats were a staple crop. But unfortunately, with the rise of more modern, trendy breakfast options, oatmeal porridge has become a relic of the past. It's a shame, really, because this humble bowl of oats deserves to be rediscovered and celebrated. So, let's give it up for oatmeal porridge, a true breakfast hero. 14. Fried apple pies. Now, another recipe with a once small but dedicated following has to be fried apple pies. An innovative way to satisfy sweet cravings with minimal ingredients, they were really popular during the Great Depression and rural times when luxuries were scarce. The dish consisted of a filling made of tender apples, sugar, cinnamon, and sometimes a splash of vanilla wrapped in a flaky crust. The pies were then fried in a skillet until crispy and golden, often served with a dollop of whipped cream or a scoop of vanilla ice cream. The result was a weirdly indulgent treat that brought joy to many families when times were tough. But as soon as things started easing up financially, and people had more options at diners and bakeries, this former comfort food staple got forgotten. 15. Fried okra. All right, now, another southern staple that's sadly fallen out of favor is fried okra. This crispy, crunchy delight was once a mainstay at family gatherings, picnics, and roadside diners. It all started as a way to preserve okra, which was abundant in the South, by dredging it in flour, eggs, and breadcrumbs, and then frying it in a skillet. The result was a satisfyingly crunchy exterior, giving way to a tender, slightly sweet interior. Fried okra was often served as a side dish, but it was hearty enough to be a meal in itself. As people's tastes changed and healthier options became more popular, fried okra slowly disappeared from menus and family tables. But for those who remember it fondly, fried okra remains a beloved comfort food that's worth revisiting. 16. Stew bread. Next is a humble bread that's as old as the American heartland itself. Stew bread, a staple of rural kitchens, was once the perfect accompaniment to a warm, comforting bowl of stew. This hearty bread was designed to be dipped, dunked, and devoured alongside a rich, meaty stew. For homemade versions, you'd simply mix flour, yeast, water, salt, and sometimes herbs, shape it into a round or oblong loaf, and bake it until golden brown. The result was a dense, chewy bread with a crispy crust, perfect for sopping up the juices of a slow-cooked stew. Unfortunately, with the rise of more refined breads and trendy artisanal loaves, stew bread has become a relic of the past, lost to the sands of time. 17. Beans and legumes. They were favored for their ease of storage and preparation. They were rich in protein and could be cooked into hearty soups or stews, providing essential nutrients during long days of labor. Simple recipes like bean soup became staples, offering warmth and sustenance. The versatility of beans allowed miners to adapt their meals based on available resources, making them a cornerstone of gold rush cuisine. The versatility of beans made them the ultimate survival food for miners. But let's be real, beans couldn't do it alone, but salted and preserved meats were the true MVP of long-lasting protein during the gold rush. 18. Onion pie. This pie is more than just a meal, it's an experience. It's a warm hug on a chilly evening, a comforting reminder that sometimes the simplest things in life are the most profound. It's a dish that says, I care about you, and I want to feed you something that will make you feel loved. As the flavors meld together, the sweetness of the onions balances perfectly with the savory tang of the cheese, creating a sense of harmony that's hard to find in more complicated dishes. It's a testament to the power of simplicity, a reminder that sometimes the most beautiful things in life are the ones that are unadorned and unpretentious. When you take a bite of onion pie, you're not just tasting the individual ingredients. You're experiencing the love and care that went into making it. You're tasting the slow-cooked onions, the carefully mixed filling, and the flaky crust that was rolled out with precision and patience. It's a dish that's infused with the spirit of hospitality, a reminder that food is not just sustenance, but a way to connect with others and show them that we care. 19. Cornmeal mush. Fine. If you think an onion pie deserves a comeback, then at least this next dish deserves a second chance. Enter cornmeal mush, a humble breakfast staple that was once a mainstay in many Midwestern households. This dish, when paired with a nice warm cup of coffee and a side of eggs or bacon, was the perfect way to start a chilly morning. Cornmeal mush was a simple, comforting porridge made from cornmeal, water, and a pinch of salt. It was cooked up in a skillet, often with a bit of butter or cream, until it was creamy and smooth. Some versions would add in sweet or savory ingredients, like honey, sugar, or diced ham, to give it an extra boost of flavor. But trust me, the real beauty of cornmeal mush lay in its simplicity, a warm, comforting bowl of goodness that was the perfect way to start the day. 20. Fried green peas. Now, this next dish is definitely gathering dust in the recipe archives. Fried green peas. Back when people were looking for creative ways to prepare vegetables, fried green peas were a surprisingly popular choice. The idea was pretty simple. Take some fresh green peas, dredge them in flour, eggs, and breadcrumbs, and then fry them up in a skillet until crispy and golden. The result was a crunchy, sweet, and savory snack that was perfect for munching on. Sadly, as people's tastes changed and healthier options became more popular, fried green peas fell out of favor, leaving them to gather dust in the recipe archives. 21. PEA soup. If you grew up in a time when hearty, comforting meals were a staple, pea soup was the ultimate comfort food. This wasn't just any soup. It was a rich, creamy blend of split peas, vegetables, and sometimes ham or bacon, all simmered together in a flavorful broth. Why was this such a big deal? Because pea soup was a meal that could stretch a family's food budget. Before modern supermarkets and transportation, fresh vegetables were scarce during the winter months. So the idea of having a hot, nourishing meal made with dried peas and other pantry staples was a lifesaver. It was considered practical, comforting, and a little bit old-fashioned. But let's get real. The best part was the way it filled the kitchen with a warm, inviting aroma that seemed to say, "Come on in, supper's ready." Pea soup was super versatile too. You could serve it with a swirl of cream, a sprinkle of crusty bread, or even a side of cornbread or crackers. It was also a go-to meal for when you were feeling under the weather, making it a must-have for family recipe books. 22. Beans and vegetable soup. Now, let's move on to a humble dish that was once a staple in many households: beans and vegetable soup. This hearty, comforting soup was made with a variety of beans, vegetables, and sometimes meat or bones for added flavor. It was a simple, nourishing meal that was perfect for chilly evenings or when food was scarce. The beauty of beans and vegetable soup lay in its versatility. You could use whatever beans and vegetables you had on hand, making it a great way to stretch your food budget and reduce food waste. It was also a dish that could be made in large quantities and reheated throughout the week, making it a convenient option for busy households. Despite its many virtues, beans and vegetable soup has largely fallen out of favor in modern times. 23. Meatless stew. If you wanted a dinner that felt hearty but still thrifty, meatless stew was the way to go. This dish had humble origins, but by the mid-century, it had become a staple in many households. Meatless stew was made with a variety of vegetables, such as carrots, potatoes, and onions, all simmered in a flavorful broth. The whole thing was served hot, often with a swirl of cream or a sprinkle of crusty bread, making it the ultimate comfort food. Why was it so popular? Because it was easy on the budget and packed with nutrients. You could use whatever vegetables you had on hand, making it a great way to reduce food waste and stretch your grocery budget. The stew itself was also incredibly versatile and could be made with or without tomatoes, beans, or other ingredients. Either way, the result was a delicious, satisfying meal that felt like a warm hug on a chilly evening. And let's not forget the simplicity. Meatless stew had that homespun, comforting feel that made it perfect for family dinners or casual gatherings. But if you wanted a dinner that felt a little more elegant and refined, vegetable quiche was the next move. 24. Cabbage and noodles casserole. Alright, let's talk about cabbage and noodles casserole, a dish that's been quietly fading into obscurity. This was the ultimate comfort food, a casserole that was hearty, filling, and ridiculously easy to make. If you've never had it, imagine tender cabbage, cooked noodles, and a creamy sauce, all baked together in a golden brown masterpiece. It was savory, satisfying, and oh so warming. Think of it as the ultimate cold weather casserole, perfect for a chilly evening when all you want to do is curl up with a warm, comforting meal. Cabbage and noodles. Casserole itself was a masterclass in thriftiness, making use of inexpensive ingredients like cabbage, noodles, and canned soup. It was a pantry staple for busy families, who could throw it together in under an hour using ingredients they likely had on hand. The magic happened in the creamy sauce, which was ridiculously easy to whip up, using canned soup, milk, and butter. When baked together with the cabbage and noodles, it created a dish that was greater than the sum of its parts. Why was this casserole so popular? Because it was quick, easy, and used pantry staples. The whole dish could be thrown together in under an hour, making it perfect for busy weeknights or lazy Sundays. It was a lifesaver for moms who needed to feed a family on a tight budget. But if you wanted something a little different, you could always add some ground beef or bacon to give it a smoky flavor. Either way, cabbage and noodles casserole was the ultimate comfort food, a dish that's due for a comeback. 25. Mulligan stew was the Great Depression-era version of a hearty, comforting meal. This savory, slow-cooked stew was cheap, filling, and a total family favorite. Mulligan stew was made from a mix of scraps, like leftover vegetables, potatoes, onions, and sometimes even bits of meat, all simmered together in a flavorful broth. All you had to do was throw all the ingredients in a pot and let it cook over low heat for hours, filling your home with a warm, inviting aroma. Why was this stew so popular? Because it was ridiculously thrifty. You could make a huge pot of stew using scraps and leftovers, stretching your food budget to the limit. It was perfect for tough times when every penny counted. Mulligan stew was also super versatile, making it a great way to use up whatever ingredients you had on hand. And let's be real, people loved it. It was comforting, filling, and fun to customize with your own favorite ingredients. Plus, it was easy to pair with crusty bread or cornbread, making it a full meal with minimal effort. 26. Stewed rabbit. Stewed rabbit wasn't just any ordinary stew. It was a rich, flavorful masterpiece that made you feel like you were dining on a luxurious game dish. If you've never had it, imagine tender chunks of rabbit meat slow-cooked in a savory broth with vegetables like carrots, potatoes, and onions, all infused with the warmth of herbs and spices. This dish was meant to feel special, more sophisticated. Invented by our ancestors as a way to make the most of available game, this stew took off in rural households as a convenient, budget-friendly way to serve a nourishing meal without breaking the bank. It was a staple in country homes because it was cheap, filling, and super easy to make. Some versions were made with red wine and mushrooms, while others kept it classic and simple. And let's be real, the best part was serving it with a side of crusty bread or over mashed potatoes to soak up the rich, savory broth. If you grew up in a rural area, you definitely remember this on your plate at least once a week. It was a way to eat like you were at a fancy hunting lodge without leaving your farmhouse kitchen. But if you're thinking, okay, but what about something that could feed the whole family? Don't worry, squash is up next. 27. Squash. In the autumn months, squash soup was the epitome of cozy sophistication. If you were serving this at a dinner party, it meant you had a deep appreciation for the simple, comforting things in life. Squash soup was a masterclass in elegance, made from roasted butternut or acorn squash, onions, garlic, and stock, all blended together into a creamy, velvety masterpiece. This dish was the kind of thing you served at a harvest-themed dinner or a cozy night in with friends. The presentation was everything. If you garnished it with a sprinkle of paprika, a dollop of sour cream, or a few toasted pumpkin seeds, you had officially elevated the humble squash to new heights. Why was it considered so comforting? Because squash soup was a taste of autumn, a reminder of crisp leaves, warm spices, and cozy nights by the fire. Buying squash meant you were embracing the season, and the effort of roasting and blending it into a soup was a labor of love. And let's be real, there was something undeniably soothing about sipping a warm, comforting bowl of squash soup on a chilly fall evening. It was simple, elegant, and just comforting enough to make you feel like everything was going to be all right. But if you wanted something hearty and satisfying, biscuit and gravy was up next. 28. Biscuits and gravy. All right, let's talk about the breakfast staple that ruled the South, biscuits and gravy. If you had this on your plate, you were in for a treat. Biscuits and gravy was made from flaky, buttery biscuits served with a rich, savory gravy made from pan drippings, flour, and milk. It might sound simple, but trust us, this classic combo was anything but. It was comfort food at its finest. Why was it so popular? Because it was hearty, satisfying, and ridiculously delicious. You could serve it with scrambled eggs, sausage, or even just on its own, and it was always a winner. People loved it because it was a taste of home, a reminder of lazy Sunday mornings and family gatherings. And let's be honest, the biscuits were the real star of the show. Flaky, buttery, and perfectly tender, they were the perfect vessel for sopping up that rich, savory gravy. When paired with a warm, comforting cup of coffee, it was the ultimate breakfast experience. Plus, it was considered a little bit fancy because it required some actual cooking skill, unlike some other breakfast staples. And hey, it even became a cultural icon in the South, where biscuits and gravy are still a beloved breakfast tradition. If biscuits and gravy weren't your style, though, chicken and waffles were the next best thing. 29. Beef stew. Beef stew was the ultimate comfort food, a hearty and satisfying meal that warmed the soul. This classic dish was made with tender chunks of beef, slow-cooked in a rich and flavorful broth, with a variety of vegetables like carrots, potatoes, and onions. The result was a mouth-watering masterpiece that was both nourishing and delicious. Why was beef stew so beloved? Because it was the perfect remedy for a chilly evening or a long, hard day. This comforting stew was also incredibly versatile, allowing cooks to customize it with their favorite ingredients and spices. Whether served with crusty bread or over mashed potatoes, beef stew was a meal that brought people together, filling homes with the warm, inviting aroma of slow-cooked goodness. 30. Fried dough. All right, let's dive into a sweet treat that's been a fairground and carnival staple for generations: fried dough. This was the ultimate indulgent snack for people who wanted to treat themselves to something crispy, sugary, and utterly delicious. So, what exactly is fried dough? It's a simple yet brilliant concept. A lump of dough, typically made from flour, yeast, and water, is deep fried until it's golden brown and puffed up like a cloud. The result? A crispy, airy treat that's perfect for dusting with sugar, cinnamon, or even Nutella. Why was this so popular? Because it was the ultimate fair food. Fried dough was a staple at carnivals, fairs, and festivals, where it was often served with a side of powdered sugar or fruit toppings. It was a treat that people looked forward to all year, and its sweet, indulgent flavor was the perfect reward for a day of games, rides, and sun. And let's be real, fried dough was incredibly social. People would gather around the fried dough stand, watching as the vendor expertly dropped the dough into the hot oil and waiting for it to emerge, golden and crispy. It was a communal experience, with strangers becoming fast friends as they waited for their turn. Fried dough also had a special place in many people's hearts. For some, it was a nostalgic reminder of childhood summers spent at the fair or beach. For others, it was a guilty pleasure, a sweet indulgence that they only allowed themselves on special occasions. Either way, fried dough was a treat that brought people together, and its crispy, sugary goodness continues to delight people of all ages. These humble, forgotten meals may have been born out of necessity and deprivation, but they've left an indelible mark on our culinary heritage, reminding us that sometimes the simplest foods are the most satisfying. Well, that's a wrap-up. I know you enjoyed this video. Give a thumbs up and click the subscribe button to watch more of this retro content.